Hello, everyone. Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. It's great to have you. As you can see, we have a special guest today. We have Ron Bass with us, who is a co-author of three mystery novels. And most of you know that it is March Mystery Madness this month, so on BookTube. And the first book is Death at the Savoy. And the second book is Scandal at the Savoy. And the third book, which I am currently reading, is Princess of the Savoy, and this is the Priscilla Tempest mystery novels. So far, it's a trilogy, but we'll find out from Ron if there's going to be more or not. So, welcome, Ron. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Thank you. I'm so glad that you were able to join me today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are? Because I'm in sunny but snowy Calgary, but you are you are in a different country.
Well, I'm in Antibes on the Riviera in the south of France. My wife and I are just finishing being here for the past month. It's been raining a lot, but the sun has been out for the last few days, and as rainy as the weather has gotten, it's never snowed. So it's certainly got that going for it. My wife and I are lifelong fans of France and of Europe. Kathy has lived here in the past. I have worked on a couple of movies over here. I've worked on a TV series over here, and we have a French publisher here, La Martinière, that also has just published the third book, a French edition of the third book. So I'm having the absolutely delightful experience of going into bookstores in France and actually finding copies of the latest book. So that's something of a thrill. I had a long career in journalism. I worked at the Toronto Star. And I was the movie critic there for the better part of 10 years. I've written magazine pieces in Canada and the United States. I did a lot of work for Maclean's magazine at one time. I worked for most of the major publications, major newspapers in the United States at one time or another. And for my sins, I lived in Los Angeles for about 6 years, wrote a couple of nonfiction books based on movies, but got dragged into writing screenplays for a number of years. And then I had written several novels, and I wrote a series of novels set. Once I was rescued from the hell of trying to write screenplays by Kathy, who dragged me out of Los Angeles and brought me back to Toronto and then to Montreal. And I wrote a movie in France here, and as I said, worked on several projects. And then wrote 14 mystery novels set in Florida that did quite well. And we had a place down there for a while, and for a long time, these books were pretty successful. There was Sanibel Sunset Detective was the name of the series, and had a lot of fun doing them. But a couple of things happened, COVID, and then one of the worst hurricanes in the history of Florida slashed through Sanibel and Captiva on the west coast of Florida, where the books were set. So the business was kind of, the business had ended for all intents and purposes. A friend of mine named Prudence Emery wrote her memoirs, called it Nanaimo Girl. And Prudence and I had a long history back in the 80s. She was a well-known movie publicist, and every time that she was on the set of a film, I would get a call from her and say, come on over and interview Tony Curtis, or come on over and interview Oliver Reed. And So I end up in the darndest places with Prue. We had many adventures together. And I thought when I read her autobiography, I thought, well, I'd probably be in at least half of the book. Well, it turns out I'm barely mentioned, but she goes into great detail about her years working at the Savoy Hotel in London in the late 1960s and early 1970s, when anybody or everybody who was anybody came to the Savoy, and she rubs shoulders with everyone. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, that would make a terrific mystery novel. Prudence was the head of the press office at the Savoy, and I'm thinking, it was kind of a plucky heroine. Was the head of the press office at the Savoy Hotel, who meets everybody and gets involved in mystery and mayhem and murder. So. I phoned her up and I said, what do you think? Why don't we collaborate on a mystery novel? And she said, well, I don't know anything about writing mystery novels. And I said, well, I don't know anything. I've never lived at the Savoy, and I think we'd make a pretty good team. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened. So I think we wrote the first book as something of a lark. I think it gave us an excuse to talk about old times as much as anything, and talk about, as again, some of our previous adventures together on various movie sets. But we ended up with a book, and we found a publisher. Our agent found us a publisher, and here we are today talking to you.
That's wonderful. So your co-author, Prudence, is really who inspired the character of Priscilla, because Priscilla is working in the press office at the Savoy.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
And if Prudence were here this evening, she would be saying, no, it's not me. But my inspiration, or using her as a sounding board, it certainly helps that Prudence actually worked at the hotel, was young, and had, as I say, all sorts of adventures at the time. So there isn't much difference between Prudence and Priscilla. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's very interesting, because so a couple of questions. One is that you do have characters that we know. In the first book, you have Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Bob Hope. You have a few. You kind of have this array of we know who these people are. So kind of like you said, rubbing shoulders with these people of the time. In the second one, you have Pierre Trudeau coming to the Savoy. I thought that was a brave choice. So that's very interesting. Were those people that she actually did encounter, and that's where?
Well, she certainly knew Pierre Trudeau when he stayed at the Savoy. He actually did stay at the Savoy. Noel Coward shows up in the books, and is actually a fairly major character in all of the books, and is sort of a mentor for Priscilla. But she knew Noel Coward very well, who's Britain's next to this guy named Shakespeare. Noel Coward is probably Britain's most famous playwright, and certainly at the time was one of its best known playwrights and performers. And she helped organize Noel's 70th birthday, so I knew him quite well. And I've always been a great fan of Coward's, and again, the kind of light, very funny plays that he tended to write have been an inspiration for the kind of books that these Savoy novels are. But I thought that was something that we just had to do. I mean, at this time in London, with everything that was going on, with all of these famous people showing up, to create fictional characters, it just didn't seem to sit right. And both Prudence and I had a pretty long history with celebrity. I spent a lot of time as a writer writing about famous peoples, and Prudence guided just about everybody who's anybody, as they say, at the Savoy, and then as a movie publicist. So we had a lot of experience that way, and as I say, it just seemed to be the right thing to do. Now the problem potentially is that, gee, you and I know who Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton are.
Yeah.
And we know who Noel Coward is because we're so smart. But in this day and age, where Taylor Swift is the phenomena of the moment, there are an awful lot of people around who just don't know those names, and we want them to be readers as well. So if you know who Noel Coward is, or Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, it makes it just a little more fun. But if you don't, they're just hopefully interesting characters in the book who play their parts, and probably could be named anything. So hopefully it works both ways. If you get the names, hopefully you'll enjoy it just a little more. If you don't get the names, you can have just as much fun and enjoy the novels just as much.
I enjoyed the conversations between Elizabeth and Richard. I thought those sound pretty accurate. I could hear them saying things back and forth to each other, and just the way they acted, I thought that was really funny. Yeah, I think you're
great.
right.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, it did work. And there's some really funny lines in the books. Like, were you attempting at some humor? Were you is that part
of course, yes.
Yeah.
I hate for you to say that and say, no. This is supposed to be a very serious revelation about London in the 1960s and the horrors of capitalism. But no, again, a la Noel Coward. When I was a kid, growing up, I was just so fascinated with that whole period, growing up in a small town in eastern Ontario. Swinging London, and Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were the most popular, best-known celebrities in the world. And, just that whole world just seems so glamorous. And I was very much influenced by movies like To Catch a Thief with Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, set in where we are now on the Riviera, which may have something to do why I'm on the Riviera, and Charade with Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant. So movies, they were light, funny, with a murder thrown in for good measure. And for both Prudence and I, things like that were great inspirations when we were writing the book. So yes, I'm delighted that you got the humor, and we certainly intend for that humor to be there.
I like that it's which is kind of the case with cozy mysteries, I guess. Like, they're lighthearted, and they tell a quirky story in some ways. And of course, Priscilla gets she's the suspect often to what is going on, and just kind of finds herself in these situations. And I mean, that's part of it. Those are the elements of a good cozy mystery, right? So are there anything of these books that you think kind of sets them apart of other cozy mysteries?
So here's the dirty little secret that I'll only share with you, Jolene.
Okay.
Please don't tell anybody else. I had no idea we were writing a cozy mystery, and neither did Prudence.
Yeah.
Only when we sent it out to publishers did we discover that we were being pigeonholed as a cozy mystery, which I certainly have nothing against. Although I argue that these books, given the setting, given what London was like in those days, I would call them these books not so cozy mysteries. But I'm somewhat alone in that, I must say. But in a world of publishing where if they can't pigeonhole you, you can get yourself in a great deal of trouble getting published. So if the world thinks we're cozy mysteries, then I think that's fine with the two of us. what sets them apart, I think, is as I say, is the setting. It's London at that time. I've just discovered MC Beaton, who I have gotten to know because booksellers here in France tell me that they can't keep her books on the shelf, and I wait for them to say the next sentence. And we can't keep your books on the shelf either, Ron. But I haven't quite heard that yet. But so they. I think of cozy mysteries as older, lovely ladies in small English towns where the vicar has died suddenly, and they decide to solve the mystery. I mean, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think those are great. I think and obviously everybody more or less comes out of Agatha Christie and Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot and this sort of thing. So those books are great, and people just devour them. I mean, MC Beaton, she wrote hundreds and hundreds of novels that all along those lines. But I think Priscilla also sets the books apart in that she's first of all, she's young, she's very attractive, she's single, and she's a young single woman in 1968, swinging London. The sexual revolution is erupting, and I think that Priscilla, as you saw with her involvement with Pierre Trudeau in the second book, I think she's not averse to taking advantage of all of that. So again, I'd argue that those things set the books apart. The other thing I might mention is that we seem to have a lot of male readers who don't understand, who otherwise I don't know would be reading cozy mysteries. And again, to share a little secret with you, I haven't told those men that those male readers that they are cozy mysteries. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your secret is safe with me. I won't tell them either. Yeah. The other thing
I like you already. Just to turn the tables a moment, what do you think? Are you a cozy mystery reader? And if you are, what do you put the success of them into?
So not often. Have I read them? Yes, absolutely. But they're not my go-to genre.
No, I would think so. Given the list of 120, given your top 10, you're an eclectic reader, but you're a fairly serious reader.
I can be. When it comes to like my tops, they tend to be that, but it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate something a little lighter and something that's, not so serious. Which is why, like, I know what I'm going to get when I pick up a book like this. You're going to get something a little fun. You're going to get something lighthearted, maybe some really unique characters. One of the things that I do love about Priscilla is that she's Canadian. So I'm a little biased being Canadian myself. And reading a lot of Canadian books. But yeah, so I love that it's kind of like you've transplanted her, from Canada to England in a really exciting time in England. So I do like that. I do think that sets it apart as well, that it's not an English woman experience those things. I think that makes a difference. Because there can be a bit of a clash. Like, people are interested in her because she's not English as well.
Yeah, one of the other things I think makes the books a little different, although invariably in all of these mysteries, the hero or heroine is taken for granted, is not expected to do what he or she does. But at the Savoy, what Priscilla faces is an all male world, very conservative all male world. Where and this was true of the real Savoy at the time, that almost all the employees were male, and the only women really who were hired, Escoffier, the famous French chef, had created the kitchens in the Savoy Hotel in the late 1800s, and his influence was still being very, very much felt, and in fact is very much felt today. And the two things he would not allow anybody to speak English in his kitchens, and he would not allow women in his kitchens because, well, women were undependable and they could not lift the heavy pots. So, and that that tradition continued into the late 60s. And it was only recently, as I understand it, that they gave up speaking French in the kitchen. So Priscilla is facing all that, and she's facing a boss who doesn't really want her there, that feels that she's just not fitting in, and really she doesn't in that conservative atmosphere. So she's always playing against that as well. So, and I think I think readers like that. She's not somebody in any authority. I mean, she's, Hercule Poirot, when he walks into the scenario, into the murder scene, he's already a famous detective. Well, you certainly, and Miss Marple, although she's in the early novels is not taken seriously, in the later novels she's known as somebody who is somebody who can solve these crimes. So, but Priscilla being discounted and people not expecting anything from her, and her ability to surprise people and get to the bottom of things and solve the mystery, I think, sets her out a bit.
I think so too, and I think now, like I said, I'm not a huge reader of this kind of book, but I do love that it's a female, like a strong female character. Who, I don't know that that's always the case, but they seem to be becoming more popular. A lot of the cozy mysteries coming out are female characters who kind of like a Murder, She Wrote almost. Like there's this, female character.
There's a perfect example of, Jessica she's an older woman, single, in a small New England town where nothing ever happens except there's a murder every week.
A lot of people die in this place. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I thought about that with the Savoy too. I thought, for a place that, and I love how you create this in the books where nothing bad happens at the Savoy. This is such a wonderful place to be, and it's always good. And it puts on this persona of being, almost perfect, like a perfect Shangri-La of getting away from everything, and then all these murders take place. So it's like,
well, and that was the hotel. I mean, and that's why Richard Doyle Carte, who created the hotel in 1889, that was his ambition, is to create this perfect place, this bubble of perfection that the rich and aristocratic and the famous could enter into and not have a worry in the world. Well, of course, that first of all, there's Priscilla, and second of all, whether they like it or not, there's a murderer too.
Yeah, I think it's done very, very well. Can I ask you a little bit about? You're welcome. You're welcome. Can I ask you a little bit about the writing process?
Yes. So, again, as it has sort of evolved. As we said, that Priscilla or Prudence swore she didn't know anything about writing mysteries, although she's done a pretty good job of changing that. But I said, look, having written these Sanibel Sunset detective novels, I feel like I've learned a few tricks of the trade. I said, I can do the Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick stuff, and you can be the overseer of all things Savoy and all things Priscilla. So if there's a strong female character, it's Prudence that's doing that. And if there's anything accurate about what the Savoy Hotel was like back in those days, it's Prudence. And so I'll write it. We just finished the fourth novel in the series, and I'll write a chunk of prose that should not be ever touched by anyone, Jolene. Okay. So perfect. It's beyond compare. And then I send it to Prudence, and apparently it isn't so perfect. And apparently it isn't beyond compare. So then it comes back to me. I'm curled up in a fetal ball for a couple of days in total anguish, and then make the changes that she has suggested. So we bang it back and forth that way, and voila, we managed to come up with a novel. So as I said, we've just finished the fourth one, Curse of the Savoy.
Okay.
So, and that's how we
Okay.
worked,
Right.
and basically that she's had a couple of health problems for the third book,
Mhm.
so she was a little less involved, but still very much there as well, and she's back in action for the fourth book, that's for sure.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that her health is okay then, or better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear there's a fourth book. Is it too early to ask if there's going to be a fifth? How far are we going with
Uh,
Priscilla here?
I'm we're contracted for four books.
Okay.
They are a number of things that might be of interest to your audience have happened with the books. As I say, we've got this a very large French publisher over here. I think they would keep the books going beyond the four. The movie rights have also been sold
I
to
was going to ask you.
a company in Los Angeles. So that could be helpful as well. I see where the Canadian edition of the third book is number 7 in the Vancouver newspapers
Oh,
bestseller list. Um, the first book was a big bestseller here in France. So we will see. I'm the two of us are certainly up for a fifth and a sixth book. And the other thing that's happened is that uh, Douglas and McIntyre, the Canadian publishers, uh, have a deal now with Chapters here in Canada to bring the first two books out as uh, what we call trade paperbacks, what we used to be called
okay.
pocketbooks.
Yes.
So, so there's a new life for them there, and there are also audiobooks for the first two books. So,
Oh, okay.
uh, so fingers crossed that the third book seems to be selling well, and that they will strew rose petals in our paths and beg for a fifth book. But we will see.
That would
But
be wonderful.
if there's a fifth book, I hope you'll invite us back again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's interesting that you talk about. I was going to ask you if there was any opportunity for movie or series because I can totally see this as a movie or a series, and I think partly because of the character of Priscilla, but just in the fact that these types of stories are very popular right now, and I not that they have never been popular, but I don't know. I just feel like there's been this like resurgence of them, and I can totally see this being a really interesting movie or series. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right. I mean, these things move very, very slowly.
Yeah.
The producers are kind of interesting. The company's called in Los Angeles is called the Ponte Company, and the Eduardo Ponte is the producer, and his mother is Sophia Loren,
Oh
and
yes.
so, and Carlo Ponti, Eduardo's father, was a very famous and prolific movie producer. Did all sorts of movies. Of course, it starred Sophia Loren, but also did Doctor Zhivago.
Okay.
So, there's quite a pedigree there on Eduardo's part. So, we'll see what happens. Having spent a lot of time living in Los Angeles and banging my head against the walls of various studios and seeing all sorts of projects fall apart, you never know with these things. It's always a roll of the dice, but they seem enthusiastic, so we'll see what happens.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll keep my fingers crossed that something comes of that because yeah, it'd be very exciting and for more books to come as well if you're interested in writing more.
Yeah, all of that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah.
Anything like that is a help. But the books, as I'm sure you would agree, the books come first. You have to
Yes.
have these, and they're the most fun. I wrote screenplays for years, and just find writing novels so much more fun, and you've got so much more control than you would otherwise have, and it's great to, as I say, to walk into a bookstore in Nice, France, and find your book there. So it's a great thrill this way. So I highly recommend writing novels over screenplays. Put it that way.
Okay.
And also, you don't interview anybody who writes screenplays. You only interview people who write novels. So
That
there
is
you go.
true. Yes, that is true. So you've written, you said you've written these, but you've written other mystery novels, you've written some nonfiction, screenplays. Do you have any other, not that this is not enough on your plate, but do you have any other projects that you can at least talk about? Anything else going
Well,
on?
there's still some life left in the Sanibel Sunset detective
Ah,
novels.
okay.
As I said earlier, I've written 14 of them. And down there, they had become quite popular. So I'm writing a 15th. It just seems a good way to end the series with a 15th novel. 14 doesn't sound right. So um, we will see. I worked with Eduardo on what they call a Bible for a prospective streaming TV series of Death at the Savoy. I didn't know what to expect. As I say, I got out of that because of just got tired of banging my head against the wall with these screenplays. When you're writing a screenplay, the writer very quickly becomes the dumbest person in the room. Everybody knows how to fix the mess you've made of things, but you. And uh, and novels are just the opposite. Um, they try to fix the mess you've made of things, but at the end of the day, if you're insistent about keeping your mess, they generally go along with it. So you've got a lot more freedom. But however, working with Eduardo, it turned out to be an unexpected pleasure. What they do is they use these Bibles or breakdowns of each of the prospective episodes for in this case a 10 episode series. So we worked pretty long and hard on that, and as I say, that turned out to be an unexpected pleasure. So uh, but I'm going to go back to Milton outside of Toronto, where Kathy and I live, and start thinking about a fifth novel with my fingers crossed that somebody wants to publish it.
Well, that would be wonderful. I think, going back to the movie and book thing, readers tend to be the worst critics when the movie comes out after reading the book. Well, maybe it's not readers, maybe it's just me, but I'll often say, well, that's not how it went in the book. They're not following the book. That's not the real story. So sometimes I'm okay
Well,
with it, sometimes I'm not.
yeah, I think is it Adventures in Chemistry? That's just
Oh, yes.
lessons in not adventures, lessons in
Lessons in
chemistry.
chemistry.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
I've, uh, that's Kathy in the background
Kathy to
correcting
the
me.
rescue.
It's a full-time job correcting me. But yeah, I think that's a very good example of how things are changed
Mm-hmm.
dramatically for a TV series that probably leave uh, uh, readers of the novel shaking their heads. And so
Yeah.
um, uh, I've been fortunate. I didn't expect to, I must say, have any involvement whatsoever in the writing of the Death at the Savoy series, but I've had at least somewhat of an involvement, although they've certainly made it clear that I won't be writing the screenplays, but at least I've set some guideposts as to how the series might go, but there are changes. They do, you're working with somebody else. You're working with somebody else's thinking about your book, and you do end up making changes. Some of those changes are necessary because it's moving from one medium to another, but
Exactly.
many times it's just, gee, I think it would work better if it's somebody else with the candlestick in the library instead of Colonel Mustard.
Like when you're writing the mystery piece, because there's almost a part of me that when I'm reading these books, the murder and the mystery is almost secondary to me. Like I like
Yes.
the characters and how they interact and the reporter and kind of his role in it and the whole thing. But for writing it, do you already know, kind of who's going to die, how they're going to die, and how it's going to be solved before you can really start writing it? Like, how much do you know ahead of time, or do you let that kind of happen as you write?
We usually do something of an outline.
Okay.
In this one, Princess, it's
Mm-hmm.
I read it somewhere and sent it off to Prudence about two fighting Italian princes,
Okay.
and I thought, well, that supposing those two feuding, fighting Italian princes showed up at the Savoy at the same time,
Yes.
and one of them was out to destroy the other, and how would that evolve? And so that was sort of the Kickstarter for Princes of the Savoy,
Okay.
and then of course you're thinking, oh, at some point you're going to have to kill somebody. I mean, no matter what the fascinating part about these gentle, cozy mysteries is that readers still want a dead body to show up, and
Right.
nothing else quite fills the bill. You can't rob a bank or uh, chase a burglar, or it's got to be murder. And so at some point you've got to leave a dead body lying around. And in this book, without giving too much away, we moved that out of the hotel a little bit. Even I got feeling a little guilty about all the corpses strewn around the Savoy. So it goes from there, and I generally have no idea how it's going to end, and that's part of the fun of it. I've said this many times, but horrors of some of the people around me. But you go into it. You literally go into another world. You go into another universe entirely, and you find yourself back in London at the Savoy Hotel in 1968. And the difference is that, unlike real life, God help me, where I control absolutely nothing, in these novels, with Prudence and myself, we control absolutely everything. And
Yeah.
that's a great power to have, particularly for those of us like myself who stumble around in real life, basically not knowing what day it is much of the time. So to enter that world and to help and then create that world is just. I mean, there's something addictive about it. There really is, and. And I know writers say this, and basically I don't believe it, but honestly, there are moments when these books take on a life of their own, that you suddenly, that maybe A didn't do the crime or commit the murder, maybe B did, and maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's a conspiracy here. Maybe there's something larger.
Yep.
Maybe, oh my God, maybe somebody's out to destroy British democracy. Yeah, I think I'll play with that a little bit. So that's how it evolves, uh, and around 5 o'clock at night, I'm forced to return to reality again, and thank goodness I'm married to the world's most wonderful person. But otherwise, reality. I want to get back to the Savoy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting world to create because, and I like the story that inspired, the third book, because I thought the princes were just, you have royalty in the books, like Princess Margaret shows up in the books. And so I just thought it was part of that, but it's interesting to hear the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, and of course, Lord Snowdon is he's in the second and third books.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's great fun to have to play around with royalty, because there was so much scandal going on in politics and royalty at that point. I mean, it's just quite breathtaking what was going on. Princess Margaret, as she is in the book, was basically a drunk. Lord Snowdon was out sleeping with both sexes. All this behavior being muted and tamped down by Buckingham Palace. So it just makes it, it's just such a fascinating time to be to deal with all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, you just you just sink into that world and think, oh God, but what can happen next? Gangsters could show up, spies could show up. The Cold War was on. All this stuff was swirling around. Plus, as we get in the latest book, a threat to British democracy.
Oh, okay.
And not to give too much away, in the fourth book,
Yeah.
Curse of the Savoy, Queen Elizabeth shows up.
Okay.
But don't tell anybody.
I won't tell anyway, and it's it's a secret
You
between
got a lot of secrets to hold on to, Jolie.
me and all me and all of my subscribers. So does this mean that we will move from the 1960s, maybe even into the 1970s? Will time move, or are we kind of staying in the same time period?
I think for the time being, I think these books are a bit of a time capsule. Sherlock Holmes, basically in the Conan Doyle stories, was always, in the 1880s, 1890s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Raymond Chandler always kept Philip Marlowe, his detective in 1930s Los Angeles. I don't know what we would do with Priscilla if suddenly she's, I don't know, 40 or 50 years of age, and it's, the 60s and the 70s. Let's put it this way. We haven't been faced with that just yet.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about? Is there anything you're...
No, other than to say, as I think we've talked about in our, I think, very interesting conversation tonight, that they're meant to be fun, page-turning reads. With some humor, as you say, with some interesting and sometimes very eccentric characters, some real characters, all set against this glamorous background of the Savoy and this absolutely fascinating time that was London in the late 1960s. And the intention is to keep the reader turning pages and wondering what's going to happen next. And if Prudence and I succeed in doing that, then we will be very happy authors. I think it's underestimated how difficult it is just to do what Graham Greene, who used to live here in Antibes, called entertainment, and to do a novel that is entertaining. Is not an easy feat to pull off, and I don't think it's pulled off nearly as well today as it used to be, or at least maybe I just found it all much more entertaining when I was a kid. But our intention is a kind of throwback to that. Is as I say, is to when you close the book, you've had a good time, even though there may be a murder or two.
Yeah. That's half the fun, though. I think you've definitely done that, and I think, I think you've definitely done that. So this is already out. This came out March 9th, I believe, here in Canada.
Yeah, it's out in bookstores now. That's the other thing we should say. Yes, it's at a bookstore. If it's not in your local chapters, and hopefully it is, but it's very easy to order them online. And if you order today, and they usually get there the next day. So
yes, exactly.
And there's an ebook as well.
And you said audiobooks.
The first two books are audiobooks. So yeah. So
I don't know if you would agree with me, but oops, sorry, I didn't mean to hit the thing. But I would say that if you start at the beginning, then that makes sense, because you probably could read them standalone, but I think the first and second book give you an idea of who Priscilla is and how she's going to kind of grow and develop as a character. And then it just makes it more interesting to see what kind of shenanigans she gets herself into. So as we start at the beginning.
Or better yet, buy all three.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Get all three. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today and for sharing a little bit more about the Priscilla Tempest mysteries. And hopefully we can chat again soon when there's a movie or the fourth and fifth book. I hope that happens. So
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks, Jolene. It's great fun talking to you, and I really enjoyed our. It's amazing technology. Once we get it straightened around, uh, puts you in Calgary and me in Antibes having a great conversation. So much appreciated.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ron. It was so great to chat with him and to learn more about the Priscilla Tempest mysteries. If you are interested and you enjoy a cozy mystery, this is an excellent series, and I'm really happy to hear that there's some more books coming out for that. Please let me know what cozy mysteries you enjoy. What are you reading? Are you participating in March Mystery Madness this month? I would love to hear all about it, so please leave all your comments below, and I look forward to chatting with you there. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.